Welcome to VoiceOver, the movie podcast where we talk about the movies that move you. I'm your host, Heather Bigley, and I talk with people about movies that made a mark, taught them something important, showed them a new way of being in relationship, created a space for self-reflection, touched them emotionally, spiritually. And it's not always the movie you'd expect. Today, my guest and I are talking about How Do You Know from 2010, directed by James Brooks. It stars Reese Witherspoon as a softball player who doesn't make the Olympic roster for Team USA and then ends up in this love triangle with Owen Wilson as Maddie, a pitcher with the Washington Nationals, and Paul Rudd as George, who's under federal investigation because of his father's corporate malfeasance, and the dad is played by Jack Nicholson. As you can tell, this was a star-studded cast. It even has Kathryn Hahn as George's secretary, a secretary who is very pregnant. And if there's any axiom in fiction, like you see a gun in chapter 1, it must go off by the end of the novel, well, we have a similar one in film, which is if there's a pregnant character, she's going to go into labor by the end of the film. So that also happens. Behind the scenes, it has Janusz Kaminski as the cinematographer. This is the man who worked with Steven Spielberg on Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. Also, the score is from Hans Zimmer, the composer who has contributed to Ridley Scott and Christopher Nolan films, most notably Inception and Interstellar. It's also one of the last films that Richard Marx edited. He's done You've Got Mail, Father of the Bride, Say Anything, Pretty in Pink, Terms of Endearment, Godfather 2, and one of my personal favorites, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. So even with all this star power and incredible skill behind the scenes, the film seriously underperformed. The budget was something like $120 million, and it made maybe $70 million in the box office. And it was panned by many critics, and also by my guest, Liberty Barnes, as you'll soon hear. And just so you know, you can stick around after the show for recommendations on what movies to see next. I am here with a special guest. Her name is Liberty Barnes, and she's going to talk to us about one of her favorite movies. Liberty, we've known each other for a long time. Isn't that weird?
That's true. It is weird.
You reach this point in your 40s when you start saying, I've known somebody for 30 years. I've known somebody for 25 years. How is it possible? We haven't, of course, always kept in touch, but we did get back in touch when you were working on a book. So tell us a little bit about you.
When we first met, we were both studying film as undergrads. Then I went on to do a Ph.D. in sociology.
Fascinating.
I've sort of worked on again, off again, but mostly off for the last few years. I am hoping to get back to finishing that book. The book is about the culture and development of children's hospitals. And I'm back in the children's hospital now after the pandemic. So
what was that like to go back?
It was wonderful.
Oh, I'm glad.
I was a little bit nervous, very nervous, just thinking, they warned me things are different now. Things have changed. We have more rules. And I really was nervous that all of the observations that I had written about before the pandemic would be null and void. And I was glad to see that it's really retained its personality and the vibe.
I mean, when I was reading your book, I was struck by the sacred nature of it all.
Good. That's what I am hoping people will be struck by. And it does still feel really sacred.
Well, good luck on the book. We're here to talk about a movie which you said to me you thought was a colossal waste of time the first time you saw it. And then something changed for you.
So the movie is called How Do You Know? It came out in 2010. And that's the same year that my son was born. And I remember that I saw it in the theaters. My fourth kid was born that year. So I either saw it when I was very pregnant or had a newborn baby in tow. I don't remember. So I was really at a kind of different point in my life. It was very maternal. I had 4 children. I was really up to my elbows in diapers and laundry and dishes. And I went to see the movie. And like the whole time I was there with my husband and we were like, should we walk out? This is so lousy. Like, it's so bad. Like, oh, the dialogue was just making me cringe. And I thought the acting was terrible. And the whole time I was like, who wrote this? What is going on? And it was one of those things where you walk out and you're like, well, that's 2 hours of my life I'll never get back. And I kind of hated it. And I just never really thought about it again.
Well, and what's interesting, I have to say, is when I looked up the film, when you mentioned it, I was like, wait a minute, this is James L. Brooks. This is Gracie Films. These are the guys who did Broadcast News and As Good as It Gets and Terms of Endearment, Spanglish, and Gracie Films itself was like the people who launched Wes Anderson, and they've got a track record. So to see like the reviews that came out about the film were just like, hello, what happened? So it's a sad day for Gracie Films to hear that this is not a great movie. Must have been a huge disappointment.
Well, this is what I've decided. It was just before its time.
Okay.
I'm actually glad to hear this, that the reviews were bad too, that it wasn't just me. So fast forward 10 years and it becomes available and I am quarantined at home with 4 children. We're just stir crazy. And I'm like, I don't know what to watch. I've watched everything there is to watch. We are out of ideas. And also, I live in Oregon, and we had pretty strict quarantine rules.
I've heard.
So even if you wanted to go somewhere, everything was closed anyway. It wasn't like there was anywhere to go. So I was like, I see it come up on streaming, and I'm like, what is that? And I watched the trailer, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I hated that film. I'm going to hate watch this movie right now.
So that's an activity for Liberty Barnes. Hate watching.
Yes. Let's hate watch this and just get our adrenaline going and just get angry. Anyway, I started watching it and I was like, wait, I love this. This show is hilarious. There's this character that you are introduced to right at the very beginning. It's Owen Wilson. He plays Maddie, the boyfriend, and he is this huge narcissist.
What I have to do is just get to the place where I appreciate what the game gave me and accept and even embrace the obvious, you know, that the time comes for every athlete.
Well, it's never going to come from me.
And the first time I saw it, I was like, I hate everything about this person. I don't like him at all. And then I saw it again and I was like, he's hilarious. He's honest. He's incredibly narcissistic, yet totally authentic about it, you know?
Right. Which is what she says to him in the film. Like, she has this apology where she's like, you're just being you.
Maddie, what am I doing? I caught myself. Don't judge anybody else until you check yourself out. That way you're lucky if it's your fault, because then you can correct the situation. I ended up with an attractive guy who you'd have to be an idiot to mistake for anything more than just a fun friendship. Instead, I give that guy a hard time for just being who he is. Totally my fault. I'm sorry.
Yes.
She's in a love triangle. She's got the narcissistic rich boyfriend who her coach says as positives, he can like pitch 95 miles an hour and he makes $14 million a year. And then there's Paul Rudd, who plays the nice guy. And he is nice, a little confused about what he's doing with himself and how he got to where he is. And she's got to choose between them. And I have to say, Kathryn Hahn is also in this movie. And as I saw the love triangle set up, I was like, oh, so Paul Rudd should go with Kathryn Hahn. And Reese Witherspoon should just stay with Owen Wilson, because why not? Like, she's having fun and he is changing. That's what's interesting to me about the Owen Wilson character. He does change and grow. And he does want to be better when it's explained to him what he's doing wrong. Like, oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to try that now. Right. So
yeah,
in my mind, I was like, well, he is far from perfect, but he is like, he's making an effort.
The casting, I love Reese Witherspoon, but I think this is one of her weakest performances.
Oh, really?
You know, sometimes I watch it and I think maybe she just got really bad direction. Maybe like there was something disjointed. I don't know. In some scenes, she just knocks it out of the park. In other scenes, like words are coming out of her mouth that it just isn't working. And I don't know if she had a different vision for the character than the director did. I also just wonder if she was miscast.
I wondered if there was a lot that got cut out of the final edit. Like, if you had told me this was based on a novel, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like, because there were just whole sections where it's like, wait, we've changed our minds. We're moving in a new direction. What's going on here? And, she's a softball player, but we rarely see her play softball. And, there's just these little things where I thought either too much is in the stew pot and they had to take some stuff out.
Yeah. Just to back up. So I saw it in 2020. And in 2017, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I went through cancer treatments successfully. It's interesting because my experience with cancer and medicine was actually as good as can be expected.
Yeah.
But it is one of those experiences. And it's not that it turned things in my life sour, but it revealed to me the things in my life that were already sour, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Your life just kind of goes in this limbo space.
Right.
And we're just going to get through life for a while. The pandemic started and I just felt like my life just got put on hold again. And it felt really hard, And so I think that coming back to that movie I just was a different person. I was just a very different person at that point. And in about a month before the schools closed here, I started therapy. I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, but I knew that I wasn't well. And so I started going to counseling, and 4 weeks into counseling, it got moved online.
Yeah.
And I started reading books, and the thing that's funny about How Do You Know is it's full of all these platitudes. And in some ways, I think it's mocking a lot of them. Reese Witherspoon has all these little Post-it notes on her mirror that are reminding her about courage and overcoming fear. And if you actually look at the screenwriting, the Paul Rudd character speaks in platitudes a lot. He kind of, the lines that come out of his mouth are just these little platitudes about life.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we were working on in therapy was being deliberate, just always being deliberate about your choices. And that's really hard to do. And then you kind of find yourself going, wait, I actually don't know what I want. And there's this hilarious, the scene is not intended to be funny, really. It's not a funny scene, but it's hilarious in a mocking way as I mock the film. I don't know if you remember, she goes in to see a therapist.
Tony Shalhoub. Yeah.
Yes.
Sit down.
I don't want to lie down.
I said sit down.
I don't think you did.
Yes, I did. I never asked someone to lie down on a first visit.
Sorry.
Okay.
Tony Shalhoub is her therapist, and she gets in there and she realizes, I don't want to be here. This is uncomfortable for me. So she's like, I got to go. And he says, okay. And then I wrote this down. She said, as she's walking out, she says, I was just wondering if there's one thing you found over the years to be generally true in a general way that would help anyone with any situation.
I thought this was a funny scene.
Well, he is actually very funny. His facial expressions are very funny. And then the therapist turns to the audience and says, well,
find out what you want and learn how to ask for it, which is really, really hard. That's his advice. And I thought, that's the advice. And that's so hard. That's hard.
It is so hard. And it was the work that I was doing in therapy at the time. Like learning what I wanted and then learning how to ask for it. And those are they're different skills, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can even nail the learning how to ask for it. And then you have to back up and say, is that even what I wanted?
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's not worth going through all of the hard work and energy of asking for something I don't even know if I want yet,
I think what's interesting is that you're watching a movie, and I'm wondering how you felt about this. She goes, I don't know that I want the things that I'm supposed to be wanting. Like, I'm supposed to want to get married and I'm supposed to want to have children, and I don't even know if that's anything that I want. Except she's in a rom-com, right? So part of me is like, the genre says you want that. The genre is that you want those things. So I was wondering, by the end of the film, would she defy all of it and walk away alone? Maybe she walks away with Catherine Hahn. I don't know. There's possibilities everywhere.
Well, I love that scene, first of all, and I'll come back to that. Maybe halfway through the movie, Maddie asks her to move in with him.
Hello?
You up for a crazy idea?
Yes.
Maybe it'd be fun if you kind of move in with me. Hello? Are you there?
Barely. Are you serious?
And she says, I don't know if that's what I want. I don't even know how to figure out if that's what I want. And he says, well, do you feel tingles or anything? And she's like, no. And this whole question of like, how do you even know if you know what you want,
Right.
And then it comes to the scene that you're talking about much later when she's talking to Paul Rudd.
I'm just good at this one thing, And when I hear girls talking about how in love they are or how the baby is everything, I think they're pretending.
I actually have had the same thought. Is this even a rom-com? Like, it's advertised and branded as a rom-com?
Yeah.
But it's really sort of about these three lives that are all intersecting. And the whole time, people are trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah. So you have Paul Rudd. He has Jack Nicholson as a father, right? Which is, I think, great casting. Here's this presence who has all this power and is very famous. And here's little soft Paul Rudd. Who is he without his father? And what has his father done to him? And can he figure out what the appropriate relationship should be?
Just a second, Dad.
Now,
Let me finish, please.
no. Drivel does not get to finish. Drivel gets interrupted.
And then you have Reese Witherspoon, whose whole life has been softball. And then you have Maddie, who's like living his best life, he thinks, right? He's living his best life in this enormous apartment with all these women coming through the door. And he's not even asking any questions at all.
I think part of me was like, in 2010, I'd been married for 11 years. Thinking about my own dating life, it was still too soon. It wasn't funny yet.
I didn't have a dating life very much at all. So rom-coms are kind of fascinating because it's like, oh, is that what was supposed to happen? Like I was supposed to be in a love triangle and two men were supposed to like really like desire me. And
Yeah, that's what was supposed to happen.
that didn't happen at all.
Okay, so I want to say the thing about the Paul Rudd character. There's this hilarious line that's given by the lawyer, George and Charles' lawyer, and was actually played by Mark Lynn Baker, who is from Perfect Strangers.
Yep.
But he plays the lawyer, and he has a very small part. But he says to Paul Rudd, "Can I offer you some advice?"
Accept the enormity. Give up illusions of containment. The hardest fact of all is that no matter what the outcome, it is unlikely that you can ever again be the person you have been until now.
And that's actually the launch for the character early on in the movie. And so you kind of know that's the direction he's headed. But I think that was, like, when we're talking about at a spiritual level, like, that was my reality at the time, that I was never going to go back to being the mom or the person that I was before I had cancer.
Right.
We as a family were never going to go back to who we were and the routines we had before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, life was changing, and it's been true. We are a different family now. We have different dynamics now. We have different goals now. Like, things changed, and when you're in the middle of change, I think that the only relief you can find is in the thought that you'll get back to normal, that you'll go back to normal. And accepting the enormity is so hard.
Right.
Eventually, it's inevitable. You have to accept it. But getting your brain there takes a while. It's a process.
Yeah. What's really interesting is that that's incredible advice. And I can think of times in my life where I really could have used that advice. I was on the job market in academia for a while and was never able, largely because of recession economics, to get the job that I had been training for. And then to know that when you stop trying to get the job, you can never go back. And there was all this grief. And there was also all this, like, who do I blame? Do I blame myself? Well, that's untenable. Like, I won't be able to get out of bed if I blame myself. And I had this time where I would just start going back through every decision. How did I get here? How did I get here? How did I get here? It was so painful. But if I could have just a little earlier maybe said, it's all going to change. And that's going to hurt, but it's eventually, you're going to come out on the other side of this and you'll like who you are. Like that would have been really helpful. Instead, it was like, will I ever like myself again because I failed at something that I thought was important?
Yes. I hear you. And people outside of academia cannot even understand that kind of pressure. I remember like thinking, if I play all my cards just right, I can stretch out this research project and then I can go back on the market in academia. But that was before I had cancer and before a pandemic. And then I just watched that ship sail away.
Yeah.
And there was part of me that in the back of my head was like, if I had been more aggressive, you know, there are other moms who had 4 kids and a full-time job, and it's a lot to grieve. It's a lot.
Okay, so this is all leading up to a question, which is your favorite movies or the movies you watch again and again, even if they're not spiritual, are impacting you on a spiritual level. You posited this in our sort of pre-interview.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think that we have an emotional self and we have a social self. And I don't think our spiritual self is wholly a separate category, that our spiritual self, you know, overlaps with these other aspects of our lives. And if something keeps speaking to us at an emotional level, whether it makes us laugh or it makes us cry, or it's, you know, somehow provoking thought processes for us, it is impacting our spiritual life and our spiritual self. You know, I got into therapy and my therapist is not a particularly religious person. And sometimes we'd be talking and I'd tell her some principle by which I've lived my whole life. And she'd say, well, who told you that? And I'd be like, well, Jesus said that. And she'd be like, I don't know, you know? And
what is one of these principles? I want to know.
Oh, like one time she said, I was talking about how I wanted to unfriend some people on Facebook, but I can't. And she was like, why not? And I was like, well, because, you know, you have to love everybody. And she was like, who told you that? And I was like, Jesus said love everyone. And she was like, who said that? And I was like, it's a song. This whole process of figuring out what you want, I realized it requires so much spiritual introspection, right?
Right.
That especially in the Christian tradition, we have this idea that you find yourself when you lose yourself, and you should be always giving yourself in the service to others, and you always say yes. And so things like learning about boundaries and learning about personal goals and development actually felt incredibly selfish for me.
Yeah.
The first day that I was in therapy, she said, you need to be the number one priority in your life. And I was like after my children and my husband. And she was like, no, like number one. And I was like, oh, so like after God? And she was like, no, number one. I need you right now to make yourself your first priority in your life. And if you've been raised in a giving, selfless, Christ-like sort of tradition, that just, it honestly sounded wicked to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was like, what? This woman wants me to become some kind of egomaniac narcissist. And it takes a while to learn that, like, if you don't make yourself your first priority, you actually have very little to give to anyone else. If you don't know yourself, you can't love God. If you don't know yourself, you can't love your children. Like, there's so much work you have to do to learn about who you are. It's not about indulging ourselves. It's about investing. Like, we need to invest in ourselves.
Right.
And I do think that's a way to glorify God, is by saying, I am a creation of God and I need to be maintained like an important thing.
Right. I'm a joint heir of Christ. Therefore, I'm valuable and I can invest in myself. Yeah. Well, do you have anything else to say about this movie?
One thing that I really like about it is how honest all the characters are, right? Like that Maddie is very honest. And he's honest about the fact that he only cares about himself. He's very honest about it. And then Reese Witherspoon is very honest about the fact that she doesn't know what she wants.
Yeah.
And she doesn't try to hide that. She says, I want to know what I want, and I don't know what I want. And then there's Paul Rudd, who's like, I'm just honest. I think that's even one of the lines in the movie. He says, I'm just honest. And I think sometimes there's this idea that if we live our lives with honesty, we can sail through life's challenges with some kind of expertise or wisdom. And that's not true. That hopefully we're learning to live honestly, but we're also giving ourselves room to make lots of mistakes and to figure things out and to slow down and give ourselves time.
That's interesting, this idea of being on someone else's schedule. You've sort of mentioned it when you talked about growing up in a culture that said, here's what you should believe, and here's what you should want, and here's what you should do next. And that can be helpful. I think that can be helpful. When I was a teenager, I certainly needed someone to say, please finish the college applications. College is going to benefit you. Please do those things. But hopefully it's preparing us for a time in our life when we go, okay, I have all the stepping stones and I've got a foundation, and now I'm going to make some decisions for myself, and I'm going to do it with confidence. Do you think that's in the movie?
I do. And I like that. There's this really cheesy scene at the end where it's her birthday, and Maddie gives her diamonds, a diamond watch for her birthday, which is this nice symbol of forever, that this is going to last forever. And Paul Rudd gives her a little tube of Play-Doh.
Kay Zufall discovered that her little kids liked squeezing the goo a lot more than hard modeling clay. So she suggested to her brother-in-law Joe that they color the stuff and call it Play-Doh. I have kept this for a long time as proof that we're all just one small adjustment away from making our lives work. You can see why I thought of this for you. Can't you?
I like that idea, this kind of hopeful idea that accepting the enormity, but then making a small adjustment is sometimes all it takes. You know?
Things are going to come into your life and overwhelm you, and yet, if you take the time, you can figure it out.
Yeah. The scene in the hospital room is so wonderful. Catherine Hahn has just given birth to a baby. Jack Nicholson walks in. Reese Witherspoon is in there. Paul Rudd is in there. The guy who plays Catherine's fiance walks in and proposes marriage to her. And that scene to me was very James L. Brooks, where there's kind of this weirdness, all these weird characters bumping up against each other. And then the guy who's proposing marriage says, please video record it. And he gives this whole spiel. And then Paul Rudd realizes, I forgot to turn on the video camera.
I got so caught up.
You didn't get it?
No,
You didn't get it?
You didn't get it? You didn't get it?
I get it. I'm so sorry.
Okay, come on, bring it.
And so they all decide to recreate the scene. And that actually is like the scene that still chokes me up every time I watch it. Reese Witherspoon, she says, you were saying that you don't want her to change to be loved, that you can love her just the way she is.
There was that whole list.
He was worried about you. He was worried that you'd be with somebody who made you feel bad about yourself, who wanted you to like yourself in a different way, who didn't love you the right way.
And protecting her from that, appreciating her the way you do, was a legitimate function for you in her life.
Like sometimes my husband will say things to me like, you're the best wife. And that's just like record scratch, tire screech for me. You know, I'm like, don't say that. I'm not here to be the best wife. I just need to be loved the way I am with all my flaws and foibles and failures. Just that's got to be enough.
I've had that experience where people will give me some huge compliment, and my first reaction is, I'm just me. That's all I am. And let's be friends. That's all I want. Just be friends with me as who I am right here.
And you're so wonderful just the way you are.
I'm just me. Do I have to repeat myself? You're wonderful, Liberty. If How Do You Know sounds like something you'd like to watch, it's currently streaming on Netflix. And if you'd like to check out other films from Gracie Films, the producing company of How Do You Know, well, you've probably heard of Big, Say Anything, Jerry Maguire, and As Good as It Gets. But what if you just need a rom-com to get you through the winter nights? Well, you should totally check out The Lady Eve, directed by Preston Sturges from 1941, with Henry Fonda and Barbara Stanwyck. The early 1940s are generally accepted to be the apex of golden Hollywood film. Maybe because they still made movies for women back then, I don't know. And The Lady Eve is one of the best films in that era. It's an era where the battle of the sexes was just heating up. And so we see Barbara Stanwyck face off with Henry Fonda, who plays kind of a dope. And another one you should watch is Billy Wilder's 1960 The Apartment with Jack Lemmon. He's trying to be a mensch in this bloodless corporation, and Shirley MacLaine, who is a humble elevator girl in the most enviable pixie cut you've ever seen. This is a masterclass of writing and performance. It's funny and serious and cynical, and it has a heart of spaghetti. If you watch the film, you'll know what I'm talking about. This was VoiceOver, the movies that move you. VoiceOver is a production of BYU Radio and is edited by Soraya Pearson.